Orphaned little girl cries as she says, "I'm the only one without a father to dance with." But the Millionaire's reaction moved everyone to tears. At the school dance, silence fell when the little girl revealed her pain. Amid looks of astonishment, a lonely millionaire stood up and made an unexpected decision. In that dance, a bond was formed so strong that it would forever change both their lives. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Richard Morgan gazed at the New York skyline through the panoramic window of his top-floor office. At 55, he owned a business empire, but felt as if nothing truly belonged to him. The reflection in the glass showed a man with graying hair, tired eyes, and an impeccable suit that hid a broken heart. 5 years ago, Laura had departed after a long battle with a relentless disease, leaving him with an empty mansion on the Upper East Side and a life without purpose. Richard consulted his gold watch, a gift from his late wife, and sighed. Another board meeting in 10 minutes. "Mr. Morgan, the documents for signing." His secretary, Heather, entered without making a sound, as always. "Thank you, Heather. Anything else?" "You asked me to remind you about the box you had brought from the mansion. It's over there." She pointed to a wooden box on the office sofa. Richard thanked her with a gesture and waited for her to leave. That box contained memories. They of Laura, objects he hadn't had the courage to face for years. After the meeting, perhaps, always after something. That's how his life had been since he'd been left alone. The meeting dragged on for hours. Decisions about mergers, acquisitions, new projects. Richard acted like a well-programmed automaton, asking pointed questions, analyzing numbers, making decisions. No one suspected that inside he was empty. When he finally returned to his office, it was already past 9 at night. The city sparkled below like an ocean of lights as he poured himself a whiskey. His eyes settled on the box. "Let's do this, Richard," he murmured to himself. "You can't put this off forever." As he opened the box, Laura's perfume, a soft jasmine fragrance, invaded the room like a ghostly presence. Inside were photo albums, old letters, and a blue folder he didn't recognize. Curious, he opened it and found a series of handwritten letters in Laura's elegant handwriting. "For our daughter," said the envelope of the first letter. Richard felt his heart skip a beat. What daughter? They never had children. It was their biggest regret. They always wanted to start a family. But Laura's health problems made it impossible. With trembling hands, he began to read. "My dear daughter, today you would be turning 5. Your father and I would have prepared a beautiful party in the garden with colorful balloons and a chocolate cake with strawberries, which I imagine would be your favorite, just as it is mine. You never came into this world, but you exist. In every dream I had, in every plan I made. Your room is set up in my imagination, with lilac walls and a bookshelf full of storybooks that we would read together before bedtime. Your father is a good man, but he has difficulty expressing his feelings. He would have been a wonderful father, patient, protective, capable of teaching so much about life. It worries me to think that when I'm no longer here, he will be completely alone, without the family we dreamed so much of building. I know you will never read these words, but writing to you comforts me. Perhaps one day your father will find these letters and understand that even what didn't come to be can have meaning. With all the love in the world, your mother, Laura." Tears streamed down Richard's face as he discovered more letters. One for each imaginary birthday of the daughter they never had, up to age 15 when Laura passed away. The last letter, unfinished, was dated just days before her departure. Richard spent the entire night reading and rereading the letters. By dawn, he made a decision. He called Heather and informed her that he would take a few days off, something he hadn't done in years. He needed to reconnect with the world outside his office, outside the walls of his empty mansion. He needed to honor Laura's implicit last wish, that he not end his life alone. That same morning, Richard walked through Brooklyn, where Laura used to volunteer at a public school. He wanted to feel close to her somehow. The streets were busy, full of life. something that was missing from his existence. As he passed by Helena Silvera Elementary School, he noticed unusual activity. Colorful posters announced a special event, father-daughter dance, celebrating bonds of love. Richard stopped, observing the preparations. Volunteers were decorating the courtyard with ribbons and balloons. Children ran around excitedly, talking about dresses and dances. Distracted by the scene, Richard didn't notice when a small figure bumped into him. "Sorry, sir." A girl of approximately 9 years old, curly hair tied in a ponytail and bright, attentive eyes, looked up at him with concern. "No problem," Richard smiled, surprised at himself for this almost forgotten gesture. The girl didn't move. She continued, looking at him with curiosity. "Are you lost, sir? You look lost." The innocent question hit Richard like lightning. He was lost, not geographically, but in his own existence. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "My mom says that when we're lost, we should ask for help. Can I help you?" Richard smiled again, charmed by the child's spontaneity. "What's your name?" "Sophie Adams. I'm 9 years old, and I'm the best science student in my class." She formally extended her hand, as if presenting her resume. "Pleased to meet you, Sophie. I'm Richard Morgan." He shook the small hand, feeling a strange warmth spread through his chest. "Are you here for the dance?" "Are you my father?" Sophie asked with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "No, I was just passing by." Richard stopped, confused. "Why did you ask if I'm your father?" Sophie's smile disappeared. "The principal asked us to look for substitute fathers for girls who, like me, don't have a dad for the dance. I thought Ms. Louise had sent you." At that moment, Richard noticed something he hadn't before: dried tears on Sophie's cheeks. She had been crying recently. "Your father can't come to the dance?" Sophie looked away. "My father left when I was a baby. He has another family now, and my mom works 2 jobs. She can't miss her night shift to come with me." She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "It doesn't matter, it's just a silly dance." Richard felt something awaken inside him, an emotion long dormant. The words from Laura's letters echoed in his mind. He would have been a wonderful father. Perhaps he still could be somehow. "Sophie," he knelt down to her level. "What if I went to the dance with you?" The girl's eyes widened. "You would do that, but you don't even know me." "Sometimes the best friendships start like this, with an act of kindness between strangers," said Richard, repeating words that Laura refused to say. Sophie studied him for a moment as if assessing his sincerity. Then a smile lit up her face. "I need to ask my mom first," she said responsibly. "She always says I shouldn't accept invitations from strangers, even ones who seem kind." "Your mother is absolutely right," Richard nodded, impressed with the girl's maturity. "She works over there," Sophie pointed to a small clothing store across the street. "That's her day job. At night she works at a restaurant." Richard felt an instant admiration for this mother he hadn't even met, struggling alone to raise such a special daughter. "Let's talk to her right now," he suggested. As they walked together toward the store, Richard felt as if he were taking the first steps on a completely new journey. And for the first time in 5 years, the weight on his heart seemed a little less oppressive. The store's modest elegance was small but well organized. Mannequins displayed simple and elegant dresses, and the scent of lavender filled the space. Behind the counter, a woman of approximately 35 was organizing colorful fabrics. Her curly hair, similar to Sophie's, was tied in a messy bun, and lines of fatigue marked her face, which still maintained a serene beauty. "Mom," Sophie called, running toward her. "Look who I brought." The woman raised her eyes, and her countenance immediately changed to an expression of alarm upon seeing her daughter accompanied by an unknown man, dressed in clothes that clearly indicated his privileged financial status. "Sophie, what did we talk about regarding speaking to strangers?" She quickly came around the counter, protectively pulling her daughter close. "I apologize for the intrusion, Ma'am," Richard began, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm Richard Morgan. I was passing by the school when your daughter approached." "Me? He's not a stranger now, Mom. We've formally introduced ourselves," Sophie argued with childish logic, "and he offered to take me to the dance since you can't." The look that Sophie's mother gave Richard contained a mixture of confusion, distrust, and something resembling shame. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir," she said firmly. "Sophie, thank Mr. Morgan, but we'll resolve this another way." "But—" "Mum, Sophie, please go back to school. Your break must be ending." The girl looked at Richard with evident disappointment but obeyed, leaving the store with her head down. "Again, I apologize," the woman said, as soon as her daughter left. "My daughter is impulsive sometimes. Obviously, we don't expect a stranger to accompany a child to a school event. I completely understand your concern, Mrs. Julie Adams," she responded, still suspicious. "Mrs. Adams, I understand that. My presence here seems strange. To be honest, I myself didn't expect to be making this kind of offer today." Something in Richard's sincerity seemed to intrigue Julie, who slightly relaxed her defensive posture. "Why would you do this? Why would you offer to take a child you just met to a school dance?" Richard hesitated. How to explain the emptiness of his existence? How to talk about Laura's letters to an imaginary daughter? How to say that, for the first time in years, he felt something beyond the apathy that dominated his days? "I recently lost someone very important," he finally said. "My wife. She used to volunteer at that school years ago. Today I found some letters she wrote. Letters to the daughter we never had." His voice faltered slightly. "When your daughter approached me, so full of life and hope, I felt as if it were some kind of sign." Julie observed him carefully, her eyes searching for any sign of falsehood. She found only genuine sadness. "Mr. Morgan." "Richard, please." "Mr. Richard," she continued firmly, maintaining the formality. "I understand your loss, and I'm sorry for it. But you need to understand that as a single mother, I have to be extremely cautious." "Absolutely," Richard nodded. "I wouldn't expect any less." Silence hung between them for a few moments. Julie seemed to be evaluating her options. "If I may," Richard continued, "I can provide references. I'm a businessman. I own a construction company. You can check my background, talk to people who know me." "You're the owner of Morgan Enterprises?" Julie asked, with surprise stamped on her face. "Yes." "Your company built the new commercial complex on Fifth Avenue," she stated. "I saw your face in a news report recently." Richard nodded, uncomfortable with the recognition. He never liked to use his position as a form of influence. Julie sighed, running her hand through her hair. "Sophie has been talking about this dance for weeks. I tried to switch my shift at the restaurant, but it's impossible. It's been just the two of us since she was 1 year old." Her gaze became distant for a moment, as if revisiting painful memories. Her father decided that family wasn't his priority. He shows up occasionally, brings expensive gifts as compensation for his absence, and then disappears again. Sophie is devastated with each departure. Richard felt an indignation growing inside him. How could a man abandon his own daughter like that? That bright, vibrant little girl deserved so much more. "I understand your hesitation," he said, "but perhaps we can find a middle ground. The event will be in a public environment with teachers and other parents present. You could get to know me better before making a decision." Julie bit her lip, undecided. "I have an idea," Richard continued. "What if you accompanied us to the event? You could go after your shift here and before your shift at the restaurant." "Impossible. I barely have time to go home and change between the two jobs." "Then how about coffee? Tomorrow is Saturday. We could meet somewhere public of your choice. You and Sophie. No commitment, just to talk." Julie pondered for a moment. Her maternal instinct told her to refuse immediately, but there was something in this man's eyes, a loneliness that reflected her own. Besides, the disappointment on Sophie's face as she left the store had broken her heart. "All right," she finally agreed. "Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning, at the plaza in front of the school. It's a busy place on Saturdays, with a farmer's market." "Perfect." Richard smiled, feeling an inexplicable relief. As he left the store, Richard walked with lighter steps than when he had entered. Across the street, he spotted Sophie in the schoolyard, sitting alone on a bench, watching other girls who were animatedly discussing the dance. The scene squeezed his heart. The next day, Richard arrived at the plaza 20 minutes before the agreed time. He dressed casually, jeans and a polo shirt, so as not to appear intimidating. He brought a small book of children's stories he had found in his mansion's library, one of Laura's favorites. Julie and Sophie arrived punctually. The girl ran toward him with an enthusiasm that surprised him. "You really came," she exclaimed, as if she couldn't believe it. "Of course I came," Richard replied, feeling an inexplicable warmth in his chest. "I promised, didn't I?" Julie approached more cautiously, observing the interaction with attentive eyes. She wore simple but elegant clothes, probably made by herself, Richard imagined. They walked through the market, talking about trivial matters. Sophie told about her school projects with contagious enthusiasm, while Julie gradually relaxed. Richard learned that she was a talented seamstress, having studied fashion design before becoming pregnant. Her dreams of having her own atelier were postponed when she found herself alone with a baby. "But one day I'll make it," she affirmed with determination. "I'm saving every penny." When Sophie moved away to watch a street artist painting portraits, Richard and Julie sat on a nearby bench from where they could monitor her. "She's extraordinary," commented Richard. "So intelligent and full of life." "She's my greatest pride," Julie replied with a genuine smile. "Sometimes I wonder how I managed to raise someone so special amid so many difficulties." "You're an incredible mother," Richard said sincerely. "Anyone can see that." Julie blushed slightly at the unexpected compliment. "I do what I can, it's not always easy." "I can imagine." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but contemplative. Both observed Sophie, who was now convincing the artist to use more colors in his drawing. "About the dance," Julie finally said. "If you're still willing, and if Sophie wants, perhaps it's possible." Richard tried to contain the smile forming on his lips. "But with conditions," she continued firmly. "You will go directly from the school to the event and return immediately after. Principal Carmen is my longtime friend and will be keeping an eye on you the whole time, and I want to receive messages every half hour." "All perfectly reasonable conditions," Richard promptly agreed. "And this will be a one-time occasion," Julie emphasized. "I don't want to create expectations in Sophie about something that won't have continuity." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He hadn't thought beyond the dance, but now the idea of not seeing that little girl again after the event seemed painful. "I understand," he replied, even though he wasn't sure if he really did. When Sophie returned, proudly displaying a colorful portrait the artist had made of her, Julie explained the conditions she had established. The girl could barely contain her joy. "Does this mean you'll be my dad for a whole day?" she asked Richard, her eyes shining. Richard exchanged a quick glance with Julie, who seemed as caught off guard as he was. "It means I'll be your companion at the dance," he answered carefully. "Like a special friend." "But the dance is for fathers and daughters," Sophie insisted with the relentless logic of children. "Sophie," Julie intervened with a warning tone. "It's okay," Richard said softly. "I can be your dad for a day if that's important to you. It would be an honor." The smile that lit up Sophie's face at that moment was worth more than all the million-dollar contracts Richard had ever closed in his life. As they walked back, Sophie between them holding both their hands, Richard felt something awakening inside him, an almost forgotten sensation of purpose and connection. For a brief moment, they seemed like a family, an improvised family, born of chance and necessity, but with potential for something deeper. At the farewell, Sophie hugged him spontaneously, and Richard felt his eyes moisten. It was as if Laura were there smiling at him, silently approving his choice. "Until Wednesday then," Julie said, still cautious, but with a shy smile on her lips. "Until Wednesday," Richard confirmed, knowing that the days until then would seem endless. The days leading up to the dance passed in a mix of anxiety and anticipation for Richard. In his office, he found himself smiling for no apparent reason, to the astonishment of his employees, accustomed to his always serious countenance. Heather, his secretary for 15 years, even asked if he was feeling well, which made him realize how noticeable his change in mood was. On Wednesday, Richard cancelled all his afternoon meetings. For the first time in years, something was more important than his business. He went home to change clothes, opting for a discreet navy blue suit that Laura always said matched his eyes. Looking at himself in the mirror, he noticed something different in his own face. There was life in his gaze again. He arrived at the school punctually at 5 in the afternoon, as arranged with Julie. The courtyard was decorated with colorful lights and silver ribbons. Fathers and daughters arrived gradually, creating an atmosphere of joy and anticipation. "Mr. Richard," Sophie's voice sounded behind him. As he turned, Richard felt his heart race. Sophie wore a sky-blue twirling dress with small flowers embroidered on the hem. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate hairstyle with ribbons that matched the dress. She looked like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. "Sophie, you look beautiful," he said sincerely. The girl twirled, making the dress swirl. "Mom made the dress." She spent 3 nights working on it after she got home from the restaurant. Richard felt a wave of admiration for Julie. He imagined her sewing late at night, exhausted after 2 work shifts, just to see her daughters smile. "Your mother is very talented," he commented, impressed with the details of the dress. "She wanted to be here to see you," Sophie said, adjusting one of the ribbons in her hair. "She asked me to tell you that she's very grateful and that she trusts you to take good care of me." Those words, "trusts you," deeply touched Richard. Trust was something that couldn't be bought, only earned. "I promise to honor that trust," he solemnly replied, extending his hand to Sophie. "Shall we go in, miss? I think the dance is about to begin." The school gymnasium had been transformed into a ballroom. Soft lights, tables decorated with flowers, and a small orchestra composed of teachers and volunteer parents created a magical environment. A photographer recorded each pair that entered. "Can we take a photo?" Sophie asked, eyes shining. "I want to show Mom how good we look together." Richard agreed, and they posed for the photographer. Sophie insisted on 2 poses, one formal and another making funny faces. Richard couldn't remember the last time he had done something so spontaneous. Principal Carmen, a lady with a severe appearance but kind eyes, approached them. "You must be Mr. Morgan. Julie told me about your arrangement. It's very kind of you." "It's a pleasure to be able to help," Richard replied, feeling the principal's evaluating gaze. "Sophie is one of our best students," Carmen continued. "Very intelligent and creative. She has the potential to go far with the right support." "I have no doubt about that," Richard agreed, looking proudly at the girl, who was now waving animatedly to some friends. The night unfolded like a dream. Richard and Sophie danced several songs, she stepping on his feet a few times, which made them laugh. Sophie introduced him to her friends and teachers, always saying, "This is Richard, my dad for a day," with a mixture of pride and joy that squeezed his heart. During a break between dances, Richard sent a message to Julie with a photo of them, as promised. The response came almost immediately. "You both look beautiful. Sophie seems so happy. Thank you for this." Those simple words brought a warmth to Richard's chest. He imagined Julie at the restaurant, probably busy, but taking a moment to check on her daughter. The highlight of the night was when the orchestra played a traditional waltz. Richard taught Sophie the basic steps, holding her small hands carefully. "My mum never dances," Sophie commented as they slowly twirled. "She always says she doesn't have time for such things." "Everyone needs time to dance," Richard replied. "Maybe one day we can all dance together." Sophie's eyes sparkled with the idea. "That would be perfect. You, me, and Mom, like a real family." Richard felt a lump in his throat. How to explain to a child that life was rarely so simple, that temporary? Arrangements didn't always become permanent. That adults had complications and hesitations that went beyond childish understanding? Before he could respond, a commotion at the gymnasium entrance caught his attention. A tall man with an unkempt appearance and expensive clothes was arguing with Principal Carmen. His raised voice echoed through the hall. "I'm her father. I have every right to be here." Sophie froze in Richard's arms, her face once radiant paled. "It's my father," she whispered. "My real father." Richard felt something cold run down his spine. The man was now advancing through the hall, eyes scanning the environment until he found Sophie. When he saw them, his face contorted in an expression of anger. "Sophie," he called, walking toward her. "Who is this man? What's happening here?" Instinctively, Richard positioned himself slightly in front of Sophie, who shrank behind him. "Good evening," Richard greeted calmly, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Morgan, a family friend." The man ignored the extended hand. "Family friend? What kind of joke is this? I'm Frank Adams, Sophie's father, the only father." He turned to his daughter. "Sophie, come here right now." The girl didn't move, clinging to the sleeve of Richard's jacket. "Mr. Adams," Principal Carmen intervened, quickly approaching. "This is neither the time nor the place for this kind of behavior. There are children present." "I don't care," Frank retorted. "I want to know who authorized this stranger to accompany my daughter. Where's Julie? Has she completely lost her mind?" "I asked Richard to bring me," Sophie finally spoke, her voice small but firm. "You never come to see me, you never have time for me." Frank seemed stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't expected his daughter to confront him. Quickly, his expression changed to a mask of studied hurt. "Princess, you know Daddy's been busy. But I came today, didn't I? As soon as I heard about the dance, I dropped everything to be here with you." "The dance was announced a month ago," Sophie replied, her childish logic relentless. "Mom called you and you said you'd be traveling." Frank's face hardened. "That doesn't matter now. I'm here and I'm taking you home." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Richard gently intervened. "Julie entrusted Sophie to my care tonight and I promised to return her after the dance." "Who do you think you are?" Frank approached threateningly. "Some kind of savior? Or are you interested in Julie, is that it? You think you can buy your way into my family with your money?" Richard maintained his composure, aware of the glances from other families and especially of Sophie, who was watching everything with frightened eyes. "Mr. Adams, I suggest we continue this conversation elsewhere," he said calmly. "Sophie was having fun until a few minutes ago. Let's not ruin her night." "I don't need your suggestions," Frank growled. "Sophie, come with me now, or what, Frank?" Julie's voice cut through the air like a blade. She was standing at the gymnasium entrance, still wearing the restaurant uniform, hair disheveled as if she had been running. Her eyes shone with contained fury. "Julie!" Frank seemed momentarily disconcerted. "What does this mean? Who is this man?" Julie walked up to them, positioning herself beside Richard and Sophie. "Someone who, unlike you, keeps his promises." "How dare you? How dare you?" Julie interrupted him, her voice low but charged with emotion. "How dare you show up suddenly after months without seeing your daughter and make a scene in the middle of her party? How dare you act like a concerned father when you spend most of your time ignoring that Sophie exists?" Frank paled, looking around and noticing the curious glances. "I'm not going to discuss family matters in public," he muttered, "but this won't end here. I have legal rights." "Rights that you remember exist only when it's convenient," Julie replied bitterly. "Go away, Frank, please, not today." For a moment, it seemed Frank would insist. His eyes traveled over Sophie's face, who was now between Richard and Julie, as if protected by both. "This isn't over," he finally said, pointing a finger at Richard. "And as for you, stay away from my family. I don't know what your intentions are, but I'll find out." With that, he spun on his heels and left, leaving a heavy silence behind. Slowly, conversations resumed around them. Principal Carmen approached, concerned. "Is everything all right, Julie? Should I call security?" "That won't be necessary," Julie replied, breathing deeply to calm herself. "He's gone. I'm sorry for the disturbance." "Mom," Sophie murmured, hugging her mother around the waist. "You came." "Of course I came, my love." Julie knelt down to hug her daughter properly. "I managed to switch shifts at the last minute. I didn't want to miss your special night." Richard observed the scene with a mix of contradictory emotions. On one hand, he was glad to see Julie there, and the way she had confronted Frank had deeply impressed him. On the other, he felt like an intruder in a family drama that wasn't his. "Maybe I should go," he said softly. "No," Sophie exclaimed, grabbing his hand. "You promised to stay until the end. The three of us together, remember?" Richard looked at Julie, uncertain. "Please stay," Julie said, surprising him. "You made this night possible for Sophie. And I would like to thank you properly." Something in the way she looked at him made Richard's heart race. It wasn't just gratitude in her eyes. There was something more, something indefinable but powerful. The orchestra began playing again, a soft and engaging melody. "You two should dance," Sophie suggested, looking from one to the other with barely disguised hope. Julie hesitated, nervously adjusting the restaurant uniform. "I'm not dressed appropriately." "You look perfect," Richard said sincerely. "Dance with me, Julie." After a moment of hesitation, she nodded, accepting his extended hand. As he led her to the dance floor, Richard felt as if he were on the verge of something new and frightening, but also wonderfully promising. "Thank you," Julie whispered as they danced slowly. "Not just for the dance, but for how you handled Frank, for not stooping to his level." "I would do it all again," Richard replied, surprising himself with the truth in his words. From the corner of the floor, Sophie watched them with a radiant smile, as if witnessing the beginning of something magical. At that moment, despite the unpleasant scene with Frank, all three felt that something important had changed in their lives. In the weeks following the dance, Richard, Julie, and Sophie developed a routine that none of them had planned, but which seemed perfectly natural. With Julie's cautious permission, Richard began picking Sophie up from school on Fridays, taking her on educational outings to museums, parks, or simply for ice cream while they talked about the universe, dinosaurs, or any other subject that fascinated the girl's curious mind. Julie initially insisted on being present at these meetings, but over time, seeing the respectful and genuine way Richard treated Sophie, she began to trust him enough to allow them to spend a few hours together while she worked. "He's different, isn't he, Mum?" Sophie commented one night as Julie braided her hair before bedtime. "Richard never looks at his phone when we're talking, and he really listens to me." Julie smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for that man's presence in their lives. Yes, he is different. On Sundays, her only day off, Julie began to accept Richard's invitations for lunches or picnics. They were simple moments, but filled with laughter and conversations that flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for years, not weeks. On one such occasion, when Sophie ran off to play with other children in the park, Richard finally shared with Julie the complete story of Laura, showing her the letters his late wife had written to the daughter they never had. "She would have loved meeting you and Sophie," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Sometimes I feel as if she brought us together somehow." Julie, touched by Richard's vulnerability, allowed herself to hold his hand for the first time. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It must have been very lonely for you all these years." "It was like living on autopilot," Richard confessed, "until I met you two." The moment was interrupted by the insistent ring of Julie's cell phone. It was a message from Frank, another in a series of increasingly hostile texts he had been sending since the dance. "He doesn't give up," Julie sighed, putting the phone away without responding. "Has it been very difficult?" Richard asked, concerned. "Frank has always been like this. He shows up when it suits him, then disappears for months. The difference is that now he feels threatened by you." Julie paused. "He mentioned something about investigating your intentions." Richard frowned. "I have nothing to hide." "I know," Julie smiled, "but Frank is unpredictable when he feels challenged." Julie's prediction came true the following week. Richard was in an important business meeting when Heather hurriedly entered. Something she never did. "Sir, forgive the interruption, but there's a situation." She handed him a tablet with an open social media page. It was a newly created anonymous profile with a single post, the photo of Richard and Sophie at the dance, accompanied by malicious insinuations about his intentions. "Lonely billionaire approaches vulnerable family. What are his true motives?" Richard felt his blood freeze. The post already had dozens of shares, many with even more malicious comments. "Cancel the rest of the meeting," he ordered, abruptly rising. Upon reaching his office, he found several messages from Julie. The school had called her. Parents and teachers had seen the post. Principal Carmen was concerned about the rumors that were beginning to circulate. Richard immediately called Julie. "Richard, what's happening?" Her voice trembled. "People are saying horrible things. Sophie is being questioned by her classmates. One mother suggested that I'm selling my daughter in exchange for favors." "Frank," Richard said, the anger evident in his voice. "It has to be him." "We don't have proof," Julie replied, although she sounded as if she believed it too. "What are we going to do?" The question, "What are we going to do?" didn't go unnoticed by Richard. Julie was including him as part of the solution, as someone who would face this alongside her. "I'll pick you up at work," he decided. "We need to talk in person. And Sophie?" "I got a neighbor to pick her up from school. She's at home, confused and upset." 2 hours later, Richard parked in front of Julie's small apartment in a modest Brooklyn neighborhood. It was the first time he had been there. The place was small but cozy, decorated with delicate touches that reflected Julie and Sophie's personalities. The girls' colorful drawings adorned the refrigerator. Fabrics and sewing materials occupied a corner of the living room, evidencing the extra work Julie did at home to supplement her income. Sophie ran to hug him as soon as he entered. "Richard, the kids at school were saying mean things about you and Mom. Why would they do that?" Richard knelt down to her level. "Sometimes people don't understand special friendships like ours, but don't worry. We'll solve this." Julie appeared from the kitchen, her face marked with concern. She hasn't wanted to eat anything since she got home from school. While Sophie went to take a bath, Richard and Julie sat at the kitchen table, discussing their options. "We can sue for defamation," Richard suggested. "I have lawyers who can identify who created that profile." "And if it really is Frank?" Julie asked. "That will only intensify the conflict, and Sophie will be dragged into the middle of it all." Richard ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "Maybe," he hesitated. "Maybe it's better if we distance ourselves for a while until this cools down." The pain that crossed Julie's face was visible. "Is that what you want?" "Of course not," Richard replied firmly. "But I can't bear to see you and Sophie suffering because of me." "It's not because of you," Julie retorted. "It's because of the malice of someone who can't stand seeing other people happy." She held Richard's hand on the table. "I don't want you to distance yourself. Sophie doesn't want that. And I'm sure you don't want it either." Julie's touch sent an electric current through Richard's body. For the first time, she was openly declaring her feelings. "No, I don't," he admitted softly. "You two have become essential to me." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Julie frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Upon opening the door, she found Frank, visibly agitated, possibly drunk. "So it's true," he said, pushing the door and entering uninvited. "He's here, in my house, with my family." "This is not your house, Frank," Julie replied firmly. "And you weren't invited." Frank ignored her, advancing to the living room where Richard was now standing. "You," he pointed accusingly, "you think you can buy your way into this family? That you can replace my daughter's father with your money and your expensive outings?" "I'm not trying to replace anyone," Richard calmly responded. "And if you really cared about your daughter, you wouldn't be spreading rumors that hurt her." "What are you talking about?" Frank feigned confusion, but his eyes betrayed him. "The social media post," Julie intervened. "The insinuations about Richard and our family. It was you, wasn't it?" Frank shrugged, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "People have the right to question. A rich, lonely man, suddenly interested in a single mother and her daughter, seems suspicious." Only suspicious behavior here is yours," Richard replied, his calm beginning to dissipate. "Showing up suddenly after ignoring your daughter for months, just because you feel your territory is threatened." "Territory?" Frank laughed bitterly. "Is that how you see my family? As territory to be conquered?" "We are not your territory." "Frank," Julie intervened, her voice firm, "Sophie and I are people, not property. And you lost the right to have an opinion on our lives when you decided we weren't a priority for you." Frank turned to her, eyes gleaming with anger. "You'll regret this, Julie. I'll sue for custody of Sophie. I have money now, I have a good job. No judge will deny a daughter the right to her biological father. Daddy? Sophie's small voice froze everyone in the room. She was standing in the hallway, hair wet from the bath, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Sophie, princess. Frank immediately changed his tone, opening his arms. Come give Daddy a hug. The girl didn't move. Why are you yelling at Mom and Richard? Why are you angry? Frank let his arms drop, frustrated with the rejection. I'm not angry, princess. I'm just worried about you. This man, he pointed to Richard, is not your family. Sophie looked from Frank to Richard, then to her mother. With the wisdom that sometimes only children possess, she responded, Family isn't just who has the same blood, Daddy. It's who loves us and takes care of us every day. Sophie's simple words hit Frank like a punch. For a moment, he seemed genuinely hurt, then his face closed again. You're too young to understand, he said coldly, but one day you'll realize I did all this to protect you. I think you should leave now, Julie firmly suggested. Sophie doesn't need to witness this. Frank hesitated, looking at his daughter one more time. Something in his gaze changed. Perhaps a flash of clarity, or simply the realization that he was losing that battle. This isn't over, he muttered, heading for the door. Before leaving, he turned to Richard. Whatever your interest in this family, know that I'll fight against you. When the door closed, a heavy silence fell over the apartment. Sophie ran to her mother's arms, hiding her face in her embrace. It's all right, my love, Julie whispered, stroking her hair. Everything will be fine. Richard observed the scene, feeling simultaneously part of it and an intruder. Perhaps Frank was right on one point. What was his role here? What right did he have to enter the lives of these two people and cause such disruption? I think I should go, he said softly. Give you some space. No, Sophie exclaimed, releasing herself from her mother and running to him. Don't go away, please. Richard looked at Julie, uncertain. Stay, she said simply. Please. That night, while Sophie finally slept after the stress of the day, Richard and Julie sat on the small balcony of the apartment, sharing a bottle of cheap wine that she had saved for a special occasion. I'm sorry for all of this, Julie said, looking at the city lights. You didn't deserve to be dragged into our problems. Don't apologize, Richard replied. I entered into this with my eyes open. He paused. Actually, I need to be honest with you, Julie. When I met Sophie that day at the school, I was just trying to fill a void, but now... He took a deep breath, gathering courage. Now I can't imagine my life without you two. Julie turned to him, her eyes shining in the dim light. Richard, I'm not asking for anything, he quickly added. I just want you to know that no matter what Frank or anyone else says or does, I'll be here, for as long as you want me. Julie held his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. And if I say I want you here forever? Richard's heart raced. Slowly, as if afraid of breaking the moment, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, hesitant kiss, full of promises. When they separated, Julie smiled. I think we need a plan. In the weeks that followed, they faced the storm together. Richard hired a specialized company that traced the origin of the defamatory publication to a computer in a hotel where Frank was staying. With this evidence, they didn't directly sue Frank, but managed to have the publications removed. Principal Carmen organized a meeting with the school parents, where Julie could explain the situation and formally introduce Richard as part of their lives. The honesty and dignity with which they conducted the situation silenced many of the rumors. Frank surprisingly backed off, perhaps because of the evidence of his defamatory campaign, perhaps because of the look of disappointment in Sophie's eyes when she confronted him, or perhaps because he finally realized his daughter was in good hands. He still visited Sophie occasionally, but the encounters were now more cordial, without the previous hostility. 6 months after the fateful dance, Richard proposed to Julie. It was a simple proposal, during a dinner at home, with Sophie as an accomplice holding the small box with the ring while Richard knelt. You showed me that it's possible to start over, he said, teary-eyed. That it's possible to find light even after the deepest darkness. I love you, Julie. I love Sophie as if she were my own daughter. I want to build a life with you both if you'll have me." Julie, amid tears of joy, accepted, while Sophie jumped, with excitement around them, shouting, "We said yes, we said yes." The wedding was an intimate ceremony, held in the garden of the mansion that now no longer seemed so empty. Laura was present in the gently honored memories, in the jasmine flowers scattered across the altar, and in the letters that Richard kept as a treasure, not as a ghost of the past, but as a blessing for the future. During the reception, Frank briefly appeared, surprising everyone. He approached Richard with an envelope. "Papers relinquishing shared custody," he explained straightforwardly, "and my authorization for the adoption. Sophie deserves a complete family, and you've been more of a father to her than I ever was." Richard moved, extended his hand. "Thank you, Frank. You'll always be welcome in her life." "Take good care of them," Frank simply replied, shaking his hand before departing. A year later, the family grew with the arrival of Matthew, a baby with rosy cheeks and curious eyes, who inherited his mother's determination and his father's gentle smile. Sophie, now a proud older sister, assumed her role with seriousness and love. Julie finally opened her own fashion atelier, encouraged and supported by Richard. Her talent, combined with her unwavering work ethic, quickly made her recognized in the American fashion world. Richard transformed the way he conducted his business, implementing policies that benefited families and creating a foundation in Laura's name that offered support to children without parents and single mothers. On the night of Sophie's 12th birthday, as the family gathered to celebrate, Richard found a moment to be alone in the garden looking at the stars. "You were right, Laura," he whispered to the sky. "I found purpose again, I found love, and I know that somehow you bless us." From inside the house came the sound of Sophie's laughter, followed by Matthew's cheerful cries and Julie's melodious voice calling for him. Richard smiled, feeling a deep peace. Life had given him a second chance, a new beginning, a renewed home where once there was only loneliness. Walking back to his family, Richard remembered the words Sophie had said that turbulent day. "Family isn't just who has the same blood, it's who loves us and takes care of us every day." In his heart, he knew there could be no truer definition. The end, dear listeners. We hope that the journey of Richard, Julie, and Sophie has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional experience, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving stories. Find it here by clicking to the left. If this narrative of new beginnings and second chances moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexities of life and the bonds we form throughout it. Don't miss our upcoming